Everybody knows that energy transition is a new economy. Renewables are giving to the society jobs, less imports, so they are making some benefit in the commercial international operations between countries because they are avoiding the import of fuel. They are offering local industrial development. So they are offering new GDP because the renewables are creating a new economy in the markets.
Hello and welcome to Energy Unplugged by Aurora. This podcast features various experts from Aurora having in-depth conversations with key industry leaders, policymakers and academics from all over the world. It explores the hottest topics across the energy market and gives a unique perspective on major energy issues.
Welcome to Energy Unplugged. I'm Thekla von Bülow, project leader for commission projects at Aurora's Berlin office. Let me introduce you to my guest on the show today. He is our first Spanish guest on the podcast. He's been in the energy industry for over 35 years and without any doubt is a true pioneer of renewable energies. He is the CEO of the largest independent renewable developer and operator in the world. My guest on the show today is Rafael Mateo, Energy CEO of ACCIONA. Welcome, Rafael.
Thank you, Thekla. Good morning.
So to give our listeners a bit of background on you, Rafael, you are an electric engineer by training. You started off your career at Endesa and worked for the company for over 20 years. In your last position at Endesa, you were the CEO of Endesa Chile, where you oversaw the installation of major renewable projects and introduced the country to LNG. You joined ACCIONA in 2010 as the CEO of ACCIONA's energy business. ACCIONA has 10 gigawatts of own capacity, mostly onshore wind and solar. ACCIONA is a true global player, active in 16 countries on all 5 continents, and is the 7th largest operator globally in terms of installed renewable capacity. So, Rafael, let's start off this podcast and talk a bit about your extensive career in the energy sector. You say about yourself that in your career, you followed the natural evolution of the energy industry, and you're now entirely committed to scaling renewable energies. Looking back, say, 15 years, would you say you anticipated how the energy industry would evolve?
Okay, thank you, Thekla. Yes, it's true. I started my career in the energy sector in the early 80s. At those moments, I was working on coal, dirty coal, and I was living the natural technical evolution of the energy sector, working at the beginning in coal, in cleaning coal, in the sulfurization, and later in big dams, in big hydro, in combined cycles, in small hydro, and today in renewables, very deeply involved in renewables. So this is the natural evolution in the sector. I remember 39 years ago when I started my career, emission was not a problem. So the sulfur was the most pollutant gas. CO2 was not a matter, and things changed a lot from these times. Today, there is no doubt about the role of the renewables. The renewables started maybe 20, 30 years ago. The renewables have been underestimated for years. Maybe for the big utilities, renewables were considered the little brother. It was nothing compared with the big dams or the big coal or big combined cycle because the intermittency, because there was not yet a mature technology, a mature business. Just as a reminder, the first terawatt hour in the world took 20 years. The second will be in 5 years and at a half of price than the first one. So the penetration today is very fast. There is no doubt. Probably 10 years ago, nobody was realizing the very dramatic change that was becoming. And today there is no doubt the renewable are without any doubt the solution to fill the gap between the offer and the demand of electricity, and to make the substitution of the fossil electricity in order to clean our atmosphere.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying, and I fully agree. I think most of the people completely underestimated the expansion of renewable development and the decrease in LCOE, for instance, in wind and solar, and how bankable these projects would become. On the other hand, I find it quite interesting because some of the technologies that were in discussion 10 years ago, for instance, CCUS and also hydrogen, kind of did not take off for a long time and are coming back on the agenda to play a role in the whole decarbonization discussion. So looking into a crystal ball, and let's assume you will continue to follow the natural evolution of the energy industry, where do you see the world heading in the next 10 years in terms of new technologies and renewable build-out and decarbonization?
When we are talking about the evolution of the energy sector, we are talking about technology. Maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the renewable technology was not available, or even better, nobody was deciding to invest in the technology, because the technology today is very simple. Wind, onshore, and even offshore, and PV panels are very simple compared with very sophisticated technologies that we were using in the past. So it was not the moment to invest in renewables in a very massive way. Today, the trajectory is very well defined. Technology is available. That is the first necessary condition. The technology is mature, is cheap, is very efficient. So the technology is available. That is the first thing that we need to live in the change. Second is that all the markets has a very clear idea about becoming more renewables. The clear example is China. China, maybe more than half of the GDP in the world, without any doubt, the most pollutant market in the world, has a very clear decision of becoming carbon neutral in 2050, 2060. There are many economies, many off-takers, many private corporations who have decided to be carbon neutral in the next 20, 30 years. So the off-takers decide, the governments and regulators decide, and the technology is available. So there is not necessarily a crystal ball today. There is a very true future about renewables. In 20 years, we will be in a net zero emission world. Plenty of renewables where coal will not work more in the future, probably with no more new nuclear, and where the gas, the combined cycle, will be as the very peaking technology. So the future is very clear and is well decided. We are going directly to the full decarbonization of the world.
Let's talk about ACCIONA. Your company has very ambitious plans in terms of renewable development, and you mentioned just China as being a country with very high ambitions on renewable development. What countries are you focusing your growth ambitions on, and how would you summarize the main drivers for ACCIONA to go for those countries?
Well, today we are operating 10.5 gigawatts of renewables, pure renewables, no emission. We are a carbon neutral group 4 years ago with a long-term experience. Probably we were a pioneer in the industry. That is not always easy, because to be a pioneer is more risky. Today it's easier to be part of the renewables world, but 20 years ago was less easy, more complicated. Today we are operating in 16 countries, but mainly our main markets are the US market, the Chilean and Mexico market, Australia and Spain, but with a lot of small opportunities in very different markets, thinking in the future, thinking in the opportunity for the next decade in some countries as where we are also operating as South Africa or Croatia or Egypt or Ukraine, small operations just to be prepared for the next decade. But our massive investment today is focused in this big five, US, Australia, Chile, Mexico, in Spain. We have some plans of growth committed with the market. We committed to growth something around 1 gigawatt per year. So that means 5 new gigawatts before 2025, moving our capacity from 10 to 15, maybe even more. And for that, we have enough activity in construction. Today we are in the middle of the construction of more than 1.1 gigawatts in US, Mexico, Chile, Ukraine, Spain, and Australia. We have maybe 2.5 gigawatts in Spain with connection rights, with permitting for connection. And we have a pipeline around 13 or 15 gigawatts to develop our next midterm growth. So we are focused in many countries because the scope for our activity in the future is wide. But in the short term, our activity is focused in our main markets. And maybe today with the pandemic is even easier because to open a new market today in the situation without the possibility of traveling and so is more difficult. Now we are focusing our activity in the short term in these 5 markets, in the midterms, wide world.
Yeah, interesting. When you talk about these countries, US, Mexico, and Chile, and Australia, and Spain, these are very different countries in a way, in the way they are set up, and the way they have country risk also inherent. Now, renewable energy development is a high risk endeavor with large amount of upfront capital required. And now both Chile and Mexico, for instance, are countries with high regulatory and political risk, especially in comparison with some of those other countries that you mentioned. Is that part of a kind of a broader risk strategy or risk mitigation strategy to go in some of these riskier countries? And what other methods is ACCIONA using as a risk mitigation tools for its business?
Yes, you know that well that the renewables is or the energy sector is very intensive in equity in debt. So one of our obligation, one of our obsession is to secure the flows of the business for our shareholders. So for that, we are applying all kind of risk mitigation policies. Our main policy in terms of risk mitigation is the diversification. For us, this is crucial. We are diversified in geographies. We are diversified also in technologies. We are diversified in products. We are selling not just energy, we are selling energy certificates, green certificates, capacity, and we are diversified in off-takers. We are selling our energy to a very different kind of off-takers in order to secure our incomes. We can be sure about more than 95%, maybe not in the pandemic conditions because this is a very unusual year, but in a normal conditions, almost 95% of our revenues are secured. So it's because that we are diversifying in markets. Maybe some markets as the US or Australia, they are giving lower returns and lower risk. In some markets as Chile or Mexico are giving to us higher returns and maybe higher risk. But at the end, it's a combination that we need to take care. It's about the total risk in our portfolio. We are operating in 16 countries. And that for us, the target is to control the portfolio risk. So for us, it's not a matter to go in a new market, probably more risky, but with a better return in order to equilibrate our portfolio. But mainly 80% of our portfolio and 80% of our growth in the future is in consolidated markets where the return is not so high, but the risk is also under control.
Interesting. Yeah, I now would like to talk a little bit with you about the global decarbonization efforts. And we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but this is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. So luckily, the global COVID-19 pandemic has not put a huge halt to the momentum on decarbonization, especially when we look at large corporates that have committed to net zero targets. One major hurdle, however, that we see, especially in times of a global recession, is a lack of capital available for decarbonization. On EU level, the European programs such as Next Generation and the Green Deal have been put in place to support efforts in greening our economies. What is your take on these EU programs, and do you think they will be enough to set the ball in motion?
Yeah, that's clear that today there is not necessary to discuss between economy and ecology, because the recovery, the economy recovery and the energy transition are the same thing. So there is the old discussion between growth and environmental situation is absolutely obsolete today. And today there is no discussion because everybody knows that energy transition is a new economy. Renewables are giving to the society jobs, less imports, so they are making some benefit in the commercial international operations between countries because they are avoiding the import of fuel. They are offering local industrial development, so they are offering GDP, new GDP, because the renewables are creating a new economy in the markets. So that's clear that today the most sophisticated markets have decided that the recovery needs to be green recovery. It's because that Europe has a very clear decision about the economical recovery needs to be on the hands of the next generation, that is energy transition and digitalization, because the renewables are using local energy resources and limited local energy resources, and this is a very high value for the different markets. And it's very easy to develop in the different countries the full value chain of manufacturing. So when we are talking about renewables, we are talking about local energy. We are not talking about importing energy from other markets, from other countries. We are talking about developing in the own country technology, industrial activity, jobs to use the unlimited natural and clean energy resources. In terms of the next generation, it's a huge amount of money that is going to be directed to the energy transition, to the energy systemic change. And that's clear that in the markets where we are preparing a list of projects, innovative projects, and in order to be candidates to receive some part of these incentives to develop our activity and to make a positive contribution to the economical development of these economies. We like to be part of the recovery.
Yeah, an interesting point that you just mentioned is this fact about local renewables. And when I talk to the different corporates, this is a very important point for them when they look to decarbonize their activities. They're really looking into decarbonizing in the countries that they are actually emitting or producing the emissions. So let's talk a little bit about PPAs, which is kind of a central tool for corporates who are looking to decarbonize. And ACCIONA has been very active in this field, providing PPAs to corporates also this year. However, when we look at Europe and the development of PPAs in European countries, we are lagging far behind, for instance, the US when it comes to corporate PPAs. What hurdles do you see for corporate PPAs in Europe in comparison to the US, and what could, for instance, regulators or the markets do in order to kind of really push this market forward in Europe?
Yeah, that's true that Europe is delayed compared with other markets in terms of signing corporate PPAs. I remember I arrived to live in South America 20 years ago, and 20 years ago there, PPA was absolutely normal because it was the manner of investing in a plant with a private dedicated PPA with the customer. So we have a long-term experience about PPAs. For us, it's not news. Today, the good news is that there are a lot of new corporations very committed with the environmental policies that today are able of buying directly the electricity and putting in competition some clean suppliers in order to supply them. So this is a good news. These corporations are every day they are more sophisticated in terms of contracting the electricity, and for us they are a very good counterparty. But PPAs is not the only solution. For us, I said before that for us the crucial aspect is to secure the risk of our portfolio, and to secure the risk for us is very important the diversification of takers. So for us. PPAs is a part, but we are also selling to long-term PPAs, short-term PPAs, retailing, public auctions, private auctions, mid-term. So at the end, we are managing a portfolio of takers. That's true that we are very active in PPAs in the US. We signed recently a very relevant PPA there, also in Mexico, in Chile, in Australia, in Spain. We are trying to do it in some markets in Europe, but at the end, the PPA is one more tool in terms of securing our incomes. Today, that we can say is that something around 80% of our sales are contracted. So our exposure to the merchant evolution is less than 20%. And we are deploying today, even internally, a commercial team in order to be more active and to be closer of the potential of takers to sell our electricity towards PPA. Probably Europe needed to do it in the past because there was enough capacity, or maybe more than enough capacity, and the PPA was not relevant. Today, to boost and to accelerate the investment in renewables, the PPA is a clear accelerator. It's an enabler.
Yeah, I mean, what we see in the market, or what I see is reducing the amount of PPAs, or making it very long for PPAs to be closed. There's the lack of standardization in the contract structures of PPAs, and everything has to be renegotiated every time. What are you doing in terms of helping to standardize PPAs in Europe?
Well, we are very active in in conversations or in negotiation with big European corporations, offering and even signing some PPAs, not physical PPAs, also virtual PPAs, using as an example our Spanish assets to sell energy in other countries in Europe. So we are very active in all kind of forums and events in order to create good ambience for the PPAs. That's true that PPAs today are shorter than everybody was thinking before, probably because there is enough capacity and today 5 years is long term for many companies, and today that we are understanding is that there are many corporations very interested in buying directly the electricity with a PPA, but not a 15 years PPA that was before. Today, 5 to 10 is the normal length of the normal maturity of the PPA. But we are very active, and we are signing today more than 2 gigawatts of our production is closed with corporate PPAs, and we have also around 2 additional gigawatts very close to be signed with PPAs, especially in US, Spain, Mexico, and Chile. Not so active in Europe, because in Europe companies are starting today about PPAs. The American corporation are very much active than the European corporation today, not in the future.
When we look at off-takers, one major hurdle that I see when it comes to corporate PPAs is the credit worthiness of off-takers. So even though there is a lot of interest from off-takers, the amount of possible partners for companies like ACCIONA and other developers is counterparty risk, and the amount of credit-worthy off-takers. And this, of course, has been increased, this problem, during the COVID-19 crisis, with a lot of corporates being downgraded. Do you see this as an issue as well? And do you feel that the amount of possible partners for you is actually quite small?
No, I think we are between the qualified companies to serve our electricity. We are the 7th company in the world, ex-China companies, in terms of size of our portfolio of renewables, operating portfolio of renewables. So we are an actor in front of the off-takers, one of the 6 relevant actors in the market. There is a very interesting question. When the private off-takers are asking for energy, they are very selective. They are selecting between the companies with solvency, with deep knowledge of the market, and with very sophisticated tools, and obviously with enough financial solvency to serve to them the electricity for long term. We rather prefer private PPAs or corporate PPAs better than public auctions, because public auctions are more open to any kind of participants, and maybe in some public auctions, some kinds of participants are in the middle of the process. Not all of them are the same, not all of them are with the same idea. You can find utilities, long-term utilities, with the idea of serving electricity for a long term, but you can find also developers just with the idea of monetizing the standard cost of the development, or maybe you can find manufacturers with the idea of selling the technology. So the atmosphere is more confused in the public tender, because not all the actors are with the same idea of permanency, of serving the quality of the energy for a long term. When a private actor, when a private corporation is asking for a private tender, probably the invitation is more selective, just 5 to 6 to 7 guests in the process. And for us, this is better because we are competing with peers, with utilities, with companies with long-term idea about the energy supply, not with developers, not with investment funds, not with the manufacturers, that they have a very different idea about that long-term means. I was talking past week with someone about the decarbonization is a target for 2030, 2050 in Europe. And when we are talking about long-term, we shouldn't put the transition in hands of companies where the long-term is in 3, 4, 5 years. So in this sense, the private corporate organizations are very, very selective in terms of getting the potential suppliers, and we are happy with this situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. So basically what you're saying is the corporates that have a kind of a strong balance sheet and are in a good situation do actually have the option to choose between the different suppliers, and you find yourself in competition between your peers. Let's quickly talk about COVID-19 and how this has been affecting the development of renewable assets in different markets. What is your take? Which markets do you think might be most affected?
Well, COVID-19 is affecting a lot of our lives, our usual lives, but happily the COVID-19 didn't affect our operations. So during the pandemic times, in the middle of the lockdown in the different markets, we were operating because we are supplying a very essential product, that is the electricity, that is vital for all kind of essential services. Our operations were very, very well in the middle of the pandemic, with very high standards of availability, very high standards of safety, and showing to us a lot of things about how to operate in the future. We learn a lot about operating with less people, with less possibility of moving our people in our spare parts and saving money. And probably this is defining a new standard of availability and safety for the future. So it was a good lesson, and we learned a lot about how to do the things better and more with more frugality and more efficiency in the future. About the markets, we are always talking about two different of markets: the addition markets where new energy is necessary because they have a lack of capacity. They are growing and they need to put more capacity. And the substitution markets as Europe, that markets where we are well served in terms of capacity, and where the necessity is to make a substitution of very old and dirty capacity for new and clean capacity. In the addition markets, probably because the COVID, the GDP is growing slowly, and sure, the addition is going slowly, but the direction is the same. The direction is not going to change. The renewable revolution started before COVID, and nothing changed the direction. Maybe the velocity in the addition market is going slower, but with a lot of incentives from the government to get a quick and fast recovery, the solution will be also to invest more in renewables. In the substitution markets, it's necessary more help from the regulators. It's necessary to push. The substitution is not happening in a natural manner. It's necessary to force the substitution, because with less emission, because the reduction of the GDP, probably some part of the interest could disappear. And in this case, in the more mature economies, it's necessary more pressure from the regulator. And the plans as the next generation of the green recovery are in this direction in order to clarify that more renewables will mean more recovery. So it's affecting, but not in the principal manner. So the direction is clear, the velocity is enough, and probably the COVID is accelerating the trends because today more than ever, the new investment is necessary. And today nobody is going to invest in zombie technologies. The investment will be in the new one, will be in future. So probably the COVID is becoming positive in the medium term. In the short term, that's clear that the lack of the demand was affecting a lot of the companies, reducing the demand, reducing the merchant prices. But in the mid-term, COVID will accelerate the penetration of renewable because the renewables is appearing as the recovery solution.
Yeah, and it might not only accelerate the expansion of renewables, but it also might accelerate some new technologies, especially digital technologies that might make, for instance, operations of renewable, yes, more robust against such a global health pandemic. So talking about accelerating technologies, I would like in our final segment to talk a little bit about innovation, which is an area that ACCIONA is also putting a lot of emphasis on. And I would like to start off this segment was asking more of a bit of a general question. When you look at innovation in energy and also now looking beyond only wind and solar, from your experience, would you say that there's generally a first mover advantage in energy innovation?
Yes, for us it's an obligation to be the first mover. So the company started 20 or 30 years ago being a pioneer in sustainability. This was our claim, pioneer in sustainability. Today our claim is business as unusual. So for us, the innovation is a must. Internally, we have the target of being the first mover in adopting the new technologies to our usual business in order to bring the business as unusual. In this sense, we are very proud of dedicating not a big team, not a huge amount of money, but very focused team and economical resources in order to improve our operations, incorporating in a very early manner the last fashion and the last technology available. So as an example, we were the first company in our domestic market in operating a battery combined with wind or a battery combined with solar. First company in the world in certificating the storage with an international certificator company. First company in the domestic market in using blockchain to secure to our customers the origin of our clean energy, or even to use blockchain in order to make a market trade platform to sell green certificates, or even the first company in building a hybrid tower where the turbine generator is producing also solar PV with organic PV panels around the tower. That is a kind of autonomous tower. Or even we are today involved in a hydrogen, green, of course, hydrogen project that will be the first green hydrogen project that will operate in Spain. It's not too big, but we are going to produce next year 300,000 30 tons per year of green hydrogen to be used in transport or in industry. So for us, the innovation is in our DNA, and probably is the way of becoming different of the rest of big players. So we are smaller than the huge big players, but we are more active or more fast in getting the solutions, maybe because of our size. And this is our internal target. If we are not going to be the bigger, we need to be the first. And for us, there are a lot of money in the world today, and there are a lot of small companies, startups. We are accelerating. We have a very interesting program, name it Innovation, accelerating in an open innovation process, accelerating startups that are collaborating with us, incorporating all kinds of new technology, new devices, of new solutions in order to improve and to become more efficient and more attractive for our customers, giving to them the faster solutions. So for us, it's crucial. We are dedicating a lot of our time to do new things for the first time. We were putting in operation a couple of months ago the first floating PV plant in Spain, and now is a very good reference for the future to do more in the future inside the green recovery.
And what do you think will be the bigger disruptor? Deep tech, so hardware, or software, digital solutions?
Probably the most difficult thing about innovation. Well, one advantage about innovation is don't have a lot of money to do it, because if you don't have a lot of money, you need to be more focused in developing the real useful devices or the real useful technologies. That's clear that we are in the middle of a new disruption. Renewables was disruptive technology 15 or 20 years ago, starting in a very disruptive manner, and today this is the mainstream and the very, very mature technology. So we are putting attention in the disruptive technologies today, maybe the fuel cells, maybe the hydrogen, the green hydrogen, because the disruptive technologies today will be the mainstream in 15 or maybe before, because things today are faster every day, and the technology development is also being accelerated because there are many common interests in the society in order to accelerate the disruptive technology. We are very focused today in solar, of course, in all kinds of solar panels, not just the bifacial, also the thin film, installing in a lab that we have all kinds of panels in terms of inclination from 5 to 90 degrees, with floating, with hydrogen, with fuel cells. We are interested in all the future, because probably today the wind is commodity, is invented before, and the PV is invented before. Now, next generation of improvements is going to come.
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting technologies out there that are waiting to be scaled, and probably we should have another discussion in a few years to see which of these actually picked up. So we've come to the end of today's podcast, where we covered various topics around renewable expansion, decarbonization, and energy innovation. My guest on the show today was Rafael Mateo, Energy CEO of ACCIONA. Rafael, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
That was Thekla von Bülow, project leader for commission projects at Aurora's Berlin office, speaking to Rafael Mateo, Energy CEO of ACCIONA. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to subscribe on whatever platform you use. Thanks for listening and goodbye.